What's up, ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, gods and goddesses? Today we're going to talk about the death of Freddie Gray and the police officers who were acquitted of the charges. On April 12th, 2015, Freddie Carlos Gray Jr., a 25-year-old man, was arrested by the Baltimore Police Department for possessing what the police alleged was an illegal switchblade. While being transported in a police van, Gray fell into a coma and was taken to trauma center. Gray died on April 19th, 2015. His death was ascribed to injuries to his spinal cord. On April 21st, 2015, pending an investigation of the incident, 6 Baltimore police officers were suspended with pay. The circumstances of the injuries were initially unclear. Eyewitness accounts suggested that the officers involved used unnecessary force, of course, against Gray during the arrest, a claim denied by at least one officer involved. Commissioner Anthony W. Batts reported that, contrary to department policy, the officers did not secure him inside the van while driving to the police station. That's called the rough ride in certain parts of the East Coast. We'll touch bases on that a little later. The policy had been put into effect about 6 days prior to Gray's arrest, following review of other transport-related injuries sustained during police custody in the city and elsewhere in the country during the preceding years. The medical investigation found that Gray had sustained injuries while in transportation. On May 1st, 2015, the Baltimore City State's Attorney, Marilyn Mosby, announced her office had filed charges against 6 police officers after the medical examiner ruled Gray's death a homicide, on grounds that Gray had died as a result of a rough ride, a form of police brutality in which a victim is helplessly thrown around the interior of a police vehicle by deliberately abrupt police driving, while unable to protect themselves due to handcuffs or other restraints. Rough rides were already implicated in many deaths and paralysis and severe spinal injuries in several other cases. You can check that out, look it up. Just look up police brutality, rough rides. Now, the prosecutors stated that they had probable cause to file criminal charges against the 6 police officers who were believed to be involved in Mr. Gray's death. The officer driving the van was charged with second-degree deprived heart murder for his indifference to the considerable risk that Gray might be killed, and others were charged with crimes ranging from manslaughter to illegal arrest. In a later rebuttal to allegations that the knife was illegal, prosecutors argued that Gray was illegally arrested well before the officers knew that he possessed the knife, and without probable cause. On May 21st, a grand jury indicted the officers on most of the original charges filed, Mosby with the exception of the charges of illegal imprisonment and false arrest, and charges of reckless endangerment to officers were involved. Freddie Gray's hospitalization and subsequent death resulted in an ongoing series of protests. On April 25th, 2015, a major protest in downtown Baltimore turned violent, resulting in 34 arrests and injuries to 15 police officers. After Gray's funeral on April 27th, civil disorder intensified with looting and burning of local businesses and a CVS drugstore, culminating with a state emergency declaration by Governor Larry Hogan and Maryland National Guard. Maryland National Guard was deployed to Baltimore and the establishment of a curfew. And on May 3rd, the National Guard started withdrawing from Baltimore, and the night curfew was lifted by that time. Let's talk about a little bit about Freddie Gray. He was born August 16, 1989. That's actually one of my cousin's birthday. And he died April 19th, 2015. He was 25 years old, son of Gloria Darden. He had a twin sister named Frederica and another sister named Carolina at the time of his death. He lived in a home owned by his sisters in the Gilmore Homes neighborhood. He was about 5'8", 145 pounds. He had an extensive criminal record on drug charges and other minor crimes. He had been involved in 20 criminal court cases, five of which were still active at the time of his death. And he was due in court on a possession charge, actually 5 days before he was murdered. In February 2009, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for 2 counts of drug possession with the intent to deliver, and he was garnered parole in 2011. In 2012, he was arrested for violating parole, but was not sent back to prison. In 2013, he returned to jail for a month before being released. Some of the police officers that were involved, their names were Caesar Goodson, Officer Caesar R. Goodson Jr. He was 45, black, 16-year veteran. Garrett Miller, age 26, white. He joined Baltimore PD in 2012, so he was fairly new. Edward Nero, who received majority of the charges, white. He had just joined Baltimore PD in 2012. Officer William G. Porter, he was 25, black. He had just joined the force in 2012. And then Lieutenant Brian Rice was also at the scene, age 41, 17-year veteran. He was just promoted to lieutenant in 2011. He is the highest ranking officer that was actually charged in this case. The Guardian reported that in 2012, Rice had allegedly threatened to kill himself and the husband of his former partner. He had been hospitalized, reported for a mental health evaluation, and given an administrative suspension. The consequences of this threat included twice having his guns confiscated and restraint orders placed on him by the complainants of the husband of his former girlfriend. According to the police report obtained by the Guardian, Rice had also misused his position to order the arrest of his ex-girlfriend's husband as part of a personal dispute that took place 2 weeks before the incident. There was a Sergeant Alicia White. She was 30. She was also black. She had just joined the force in 2010 and was promoted to sergeant 3 months prior to that. She grew up and was born and raised in Baltimore. So that's pretty interesting. Um, I'm gonna talk a little bit about some of the things that took place that day. Dawn on some of them. When police encountered Freddie Gray on the morning of April 12, 2015, he was in a street near Baltimore Gilmore Homes housing project, an area known to have high-level home foreclosures, poverty, drug deals, and violent crimes. So the police were actually looking for something that day. They just didn't know what they were looking for. According to the documents that he was charged by Baltimore police at 8:39 a.m., Lieutenant Brian Rice and Officer Nero, Officer Garnett, and Miller were patrolling on bicycles and made eye contact with Gray, who actually, when he actually saw them, he just took off running. Now, they claim that it was unprovoked. It was based off of just their presence, which is why he ran. Once they apprehended him after a brief chase, they took him into custody. Uh, at that time, it wasn't it wasn't with force or anything like that. So, to me, that clearly states that it became personal at one point during the transportation of Mr. Gray. According to Officer Garnett, who wrote that he noticed a knife clip to the inside of Gray's front right pocket in the formal statement, he alleged that Gray did not unlawfully carry or possess or sell a knife commonly known as a switchblade knife, with an automatic spring or other device for opening and or closing the blade with the limits of Baltimore City. The knife was recovered later by officers and found to be a spring-assisted one-handed operated knife. The state's attorney of Baltimore City said that the spring-assisted knife Gray was carrying was legal under Maryland law, while a police task force said that the knife was violation of Baltimore code under which Gray was charged. So what we're dealing with here is a miscommunication within the department. The high-ranking officials clearly state that the spring-assisted knife was not illegal under Maryland law, while a specific entity within the task force claimed that the knife was in violation. So that's something to look at. There was two bystanders who actually were filming. They were filming Gray's captive and his arrest, and they pretty much showed him screaming in pain. He was being dragged by the police to the van. As he was stepping up into the van, a bystander that actually knew Gray stated that the officers were folding, with one officer bending Gray's legs back and another holding Gray down by pressing a knee into Gray's back. Witnesses commented on the video. You can hear him saying that he couldn't walk. He can't use his legs. His legs look broke and you are dragging him like that. The commissioner, Anthony Botts, noted from the video that Gray stood on one leg and climbed into the van on his own. The Baltimore Sun reported that another witness saw Gray being beaten with police batons. So it's a lot of confusing stories going on there. He was already limping and barely walking once they took him to the van. Okay? So there's no resisting or anything going on there taking place. According to the police timeline, he was placed in the transport van probably 11 minutes after his arrest. And within 30 minutes, paramedics were summoned to take Gray to the hospital. So from 11 minutes of his arrest, within 30 minutes, the paramedics were called. So something took place between that 11 minutes. Now, the van made confirmed stops that were reported. I have the timeline of the arrests and stops up right there. He was unloaded in order to be placed in leg irons because police said he was acting irate. Gray's shackling was recorded on a cell phone, which exhibited a motionless Gray surrounded by several officers as he's restrained. A later stop recorded by a private security camera shows the van stopped at a grocery store at 8:59. A second prisoner was placed into the vehicle while officers checked on Gray's condition. At 9:24, the transport van arrived at its final stop, the West District Police Station. After paramedics treated Gray for approximately 21 minutes, he was taken to the University of Maryland R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, and that was roughly around 9:45. But by that time, reports say that he was already in a coma. Okay. Now the media has suggested that possibly Rough Ride. Now Rough Ride is known all through Baltimore. It's a saying. It's a trend within the police department, within specific police forces. It's an unsanctioned practice where a handcuffed prisoner is placed without seatbelt in an erratically driven vehicle as a contributing factor in Gray's injury, is what they claim. The department's seatbelt policy had been revised just about 6 days, almost a week prior to when he was arrested, so it was fairly new. The seatbelt sanctuaries was fairly new around the time of his death. It was implemented in an attempt to protect detained individuals from serious injuries during transport. The policy was not followed in Gray's case, of course. According to attorney Michael Davey, who represents at least one of the officers under investigation, the new rules that they brought into effect wasn't criticized. He explained that certain situations, like when a prisoner is combative, or it is not always possible or safe for officers to enter into the rear of those transport vans. They are very small, and this one was very small. Okay, so if it's a very small van with no seats, why are they putting you back there in restraints with no seatbelt or anything like that. So that's something we need to look at. Was it done on purpose? Was it done accidentally? I don't know. That following week, according to the family, the family attorney, he suffered from cardiopulmonary arrest at least once, but resuscitated, but he never regained his conscious. He remained in a coma from the cardiac arrest, underwent a couple of surgeries in effort to save him, and then according to his family, his coma got worse. It worsened. He actually, during his coma, they discovered that he had 3 fractured vertebrae and an injury to his voice box. 80% of his spine was severed, and around the portions of the spine where the neck is connected, it was severed. Now, I don't think all this is possible from bouncing around in the back of a van. I don't know. Just doesn't make sense. The police confirmed that his spinal injury led to the death. That was pretty much confirmed during the autopsy. Gray died on April 19, 2015, a week after his arrest. Approximately 3 weeks prior to the incident, Mosby had requested enhanced drug enforcement efforts at the corner of North and Mount. Now, I want to touch on the officer's involvement and public response that took place during the course of the investigation and during the course of the trial. Now, Mayor Stephanie Rawlins Blake, she said that there was no place in Baltimore Police Department for those police officers who choose to engage in violence and brutality and racism. Gene Ryan, president of Police Union chapter, said that despite the tragic situation, none of the officers involved are responsible for the death of Mr. Gray. President Barack Obama said that it was vital to the truth be found and supported protests if they were peaceful. On May 4th, 2015, there was an interview on Fox News with Alan Dershowitz. He said that he believed Mosby overcharged the officers in an attempt to satisfy protesters and prevent further disturbances. Former Baltimore prosecutor Paige Coiter penned an opt into the Baltimore Sun, where she described Mosby charges as reflecting either incompetence or unethical recklessness. Coiter opined that Mosby circumvented normal procedures to step into the national limelight, and that she pondered to the public, creating an expectation of conviction. Now, a motion for Mosby to rescue herself from the case was filed on behalf of the charges of the officers on the alleged basis of personal gain by Mosby and her husband, personal relationship with potential witnesses, and the financial interests of Gray's attorneys. Keep in mind they were looking at some pretty tough dollars here, so it brought a lot of influences from everywhere, if you know what I mean. Now, the motion's claim is a close friend of Mosby's. CNN's legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin pointed out that he does not see any serious conflict in the interests of disqualifying Mosby from the case, and that the officers may not have a case with that motion. The lawyers represented that officers filed motions insisting that the city must pay thousands of dollars in damages for arresting and detaining them, or else they could sue Marilyn Mosby and the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlins Blake. In a 11-page rebuttal, Chief Deputy State's Attorney Michael Schatzow wrote that Gray was detained well before the arresting officers knew he possessed a knife, and that the motion was absurdly bouncing from ridiculous allegation to another, like a pinball in a machine that passed tilt. Mosby was ordered to respond to the motions filed by the defense attorney. They gave him to June 26 to do so. All right. Now let's touch on a little bit of the officers' involvements. Officer William G. Porter, he met up with the van after Goodson called dispatchers to ask for an officer to come check on Gray. He was requested twice by Gray for a medic, but did not call for one. He was charged with involuntary manslaughter second degree assault, misconduct in office. Porter posted he bailed out with 350,000. The grand jury indicted Porter on all charges by this time and added an indictment of reckless endangerment. On December 16th, 2015, a mistrial was declared on all charges after the jury was hung and could not come to decision. Porter's second trial is scheduled June 13th, this summer 2016. The analyst stated that Porter's retrial could have caused problems for the other trials, under the presumption that he could not be compelled to testify while there were pending charges against him. After several appeals and reversals, the Maryland Court of Appeals rules that Porter will be required to testify in the cases against the other officers. So he's going to have to eventually come clean soon, and that might take place in as soon as June. Officer Caesar R. Goodson Jr. He was the driver of the van. He was charged with second degree deprived heart murder, involuntary manslaughter, second degree assault, manslaughter by vehicle, gross negligence, manslaughter by vehicle, criminal negligence, and misconduct in office. He also posted a $350,000 bail. The grand jury handed over the indictment to Goodson on all charges and added an indictment of reckless endangerment also. Officer Goodson's trial date is set for June also, 2016, a couple weeks before Officer Porter's. Officer Gary E. Miller and Edward M. Nero. These are the two officers who pretty much caught Gray after he took off running. After they apprehended him, they handcuffed Gray with his arms behind his back. Miller was charged with 2 counts of second degree assault, 2 counts of misconduct in office, false imprisonment. Nero was charged with 2 counts of second degree assault, misconduct in office, and false imprisonment. Each posted a $250,000 bail. The false imprisonment charges were dropped by the grand jury, but then they handed over an indictment of reckless endangerment also. Judge Barry Williams found Officer Nero not guilty of all charges a couple days ago. Officer Miller's trial is set for July 27th. Lieutenant Brian W. Rice. He's the officer who initially made eye contact with Gray while on a bicycle patrol. He was charged with involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of second degree assault, manslaughter by vehicle, gross negligence, 2 counts of misconduct in office, and false imprisonment. He later posted the $350,000 bail. The false imprisonment charges were dropped, and the grand jury added an indictment of reckless endangerment. Lieutenant Rice's trial date is set for July 5th, 2016. Sergeant Alicia Dre White. White is accused of not calling for medical assistance when she encountered Gray. Despite the fact she was advised that he needed a medic, she was charged with involuntary manslaughter, second degree assault, and misconduct. She posted a $350,000 bail. The grand jury indicted White on all charges and also added an indictment of reckless endangerment. Sergeant White's trial date is set for October 13th, 2016. There were federal investigations. Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced on May 8, 2015, that the Department of Justice will conduct a review of the current practices of Baltimore Police Department due to a serious erosion of public trust. In relation to the circumstances of Gray's death, the review took effect immediately and focused on allegations that Baltimore police officers used excessive force, including deadly force, conduct unlawful searches, seizures, or arrests, and engage in discriminatory policing. As of May 2015, the federal authorities were conducting 3 probes into Baltimore police. The pattern of practice investigation initiated by Lynch, a collaborative review that began in the fall of 2014, and a civil rights probe into the death of Gray. Let's point out a few things post Gray's death. A few things that changed the actual climate in Baltimore. Um, there was a nationwide public response to the situation that happened in Baltimore. Okay, it drew many parallels to the response to the uh, the shooting of Michael Brown in 2014 as a part of a large string of controversial uses of forces by police officers in the United States, especially against African Americans. As of April 30th, 2015, 22 demonstrators had been held nationwide in direct response to Gray's death, or in solidarity within Baltimore. Additionally, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement uh, had a protest in reference to Gray's death. On April 18th, 2015, hundreds of people participated in a protest outside the Baltimore Police Department. Three days later, April  21st, according to Reuters, hundreds of demonstrators gathered in Baltimore protesting Gray's death. The next day, Gene Ryan and the president of local lodge of the Fraternal Order of Police expressed sympathy but criticized the rhetoric of protest. Now, it's important to see the whole purpose of what the Fraternal Order of the Police is. Whenever a situation like this takes place, they come out and they usually come with a whole linguistic uh, understanding of things that deals with rhetoric and the it deals with rhetoric and you know any interaction within the people that doesn't go right with the hierarchy. That's usually what it's revolving around. When they know that a situation like this deemed an immediate apology and retraction of anything that was going on. The images that you see on TV they make it look like it's a lynch mob type thing. They make it look like it's just a violent lynching of anybody who's against whatever the protesters are standing for, which is false. The protesters usually don't turn violent until indirect needs aren't met. Protesters started throwing rocks and setting fires, but you looking at a situation where there's a high level of unemployment. There's a high level of police discriminating against black youth. What do you expect was going to happen? Now, the only thing that these people are worried about, I see, is that money. When money gets hurt, that's when Black Lives Matter. Because not only on that day, there was a couple of things that took place, but money was being lost in the city of Baltimore. There was CVS pharmacies burnt down. Um, there were state troopers that had to be summoned, which causes a different climate. There was a couple of baseball games that were rescheduled that day due to the situation that was taking place in Baltimore, and then also Baltimore was placed into a state of an emergency where the Maryland National Guard was activated. 500 state troopers were put on duty. 5,000 police officers from other localities were put on duty. At a press conference in Baltimore, the mayor announced that there would be a citywide curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. School trips were canceled midday and early days. Baltimore City schools were closed on April 28th, approximately for a week. And the National Guard was actually in effect up until May, roughly around May 3rd, which is when they began withdrawing from Baltimore, and the night curfew was lifted. The demobilizing process lasted about 3 days, during which time the state emergency remained in effect. Now, since then, there's been a spike in Baltimore homicides. They had their highest homicide month that May, which should say a little something. In 2015, the homicide total as of July 31st was only 189, compared to 119 by the end of July. In an attempt to solve the case, Baltimore announced that the Federal Homicide Task Force partnered with crime fighting agencies, will each embed 2 agents with the Baltimore police to help investigate. And that was just pretty much to go in and calm down where they messed up at. Okay, so I don't feel any type of gain or loss from that. They didn't help us or help anyone. Now, on September 8th, 2015, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake announced that the city had reached a 6.4 million settlement with Gray's family. Rawlings Blake said that the settlement should not be interpreted as a judgment on the guilt or innocence of the officers facing trial. Well, what do you call that? But it had been negotiated mainly to avoid costly and protracted litigation that would only make it more difficult for the city to heal. So they knew that unless they took care of the family, that it would cost them way more than 6.4 million. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So the question remains is, do you think that the death of Freddie Gray was unlawful? Was it purposely done, or was it an accident? Do you feel that the 6.4 million in the 6.4 million settlement given to the family, was that hush money, or was it due to the family? And should there be any more litigation processes taken? Please add your comments in the comment box. Any questions? Feel free to give me a question. I do answer. I do respond to all emails. Keep in mind that knowing is better than believing. We are the enlightened ones. We are the Illuminati. Peace.